My name is Benjamin Dwyer and I want to talk about a project for improvised dance and music called KnowingUnknowing, which I did with dancer Helen Kindred. When we started working on this project together, our main concern was to try and see how we could come up with something really fresh. The problem there is that both Helen and myself are highly trained artists. I myself am classically trained guitarist and composer, and Helen is an advanced exponent of Bartenia fundamentals. So our real question was, if we were going to free improvise a piece, how might we free ourselves, if you like, from our embedded knowledges, which run the risk of making us repeat processes and patterns that are deeply embedded in our practice. So we were looking for this sort of innocence, and immediately what came to mind was a poem by Ted Hughes called Woodrow, and I'll just read that to give you an indication of the sort of kind of innocence in consciousness that we were seeking. What am I nosing here, turning leaves over, following a faint stain on the air to the river edge, I enter water. What am I to split the glassy grain of water? Looking upward, I see the bed of the river above me, upside down, very clear. What am I doing here in midair? That's just a fragment of Woodrow, but it summed up the sort of innocence. There's consciousness there in the Woodrow, but Woodrow doesn't know where he or she is going, what direction it is, it's upside down, the bed of the river is above it, and so forth. So that was the sort of innocence we were looking for. And so we felt that one of the best ways to do this was to develop strategies of defamiliarization with our own practice. The first thing we did was to wear blindfolds. Now for the dancer, this is rather extreme because it inhibits the vision of the dancer's environment. So you can only imagine the impact that would have on the dancer's decisions or the dancer's spontaneous decisions. But at the same time, it enhances the dancer's listening skills. As the player, as the provider of the music, I'm stationary, the dancer is moving, but Helen always has to focus more intently on the source of that music. Even her olfactory sense is heightened, so she can try and find her bearings within this space without her visual capacity. And for me as a guitarist, it was the same. My familiarity with the fretboard was diminished because I could not see it. It's something that we take for granted as guitarists, but the minute you cannot see, it enhances your fingers' abilities to know the fretboard more. It forced me to rely on my fingers' knowledge of the fretboard more than normal. Also what I did was I created a prepared guitar, and as you can see here, this is something similar to the way I use the guitar in KnowingUnknowing. And by employing these, if you like, foreign bodies, the single fret of the guitar is divided into 3 separate sound worlds. I'll just give you an idea. You can hear this, where you can actually play here, and then you can play here, and you can actually move this apparatus. So it gives you a kind of a microtonal possibility. Very unusual sounds that as a trained guitarist I'm not used to, but also it unconceals latent sounds in the instrument. And so using these apparatuses was a very powerful way of me defamiliarizing myself with all the skills that I had developed over the years to play the guitar normally. I also play the guitar with a bow as well, which basically shifts the instrument from a plucked instrument to a bowed instrument, which is very foreign to the guitar. So all these processes, the use of blindfold and the use of prepared guitar, were ways of distancing both dancer and musician from the normal technical means at our disposal. Why were we doing this? We were doing this to try and find a similar state to the woodrow, a kind of an innocence from which we could start afresh and perhaps explore something new. And so what we felt during these workshops, which eventually became the three-part work we came to call Knowing Unknowing, it was a way of trying to know through unknowing. It's a very strange paradox there. But I think by blocking certain modes of embedded knowledge that we have in our training, we were forced to use or explore what we call tributaries of new knowledge. And I think maybe even in terms of education, this process of finding new paths to knowledge, I think has a lot of potential. We always tend to follow the paths in which we are trained. And one thing that I've learned from working with Helen on the Knowing Unknowing project is that sometimes we may find more knowledge in the unknown routes. Thank you.